You know, I think what I like most about this movie is how demonstrably it doesn't even care a little bit whether or not I liked it. I'm not even kidding around about that, folks. In what is without question one of the most unusual features to be positioned as a first-quarter blockbuster by a major studio in some time, what stood out as perhaps the most unusual element of this was the realization of how seldom any film made over the last few decades has been thusly positioned with an eye on anyone other than hyper-consumptive white teenage boys or the allegedly full-grown men who still think like them as a primary audience. And yet, here's a $100 million movie which, from its cranked-up rainbow color palette, Claire's charm bracelet visual aesthetic, pop anthem soundscape, to its enthusiastic centering of emotion-driven, hug-it-out, power-of-love conflict resolution in place of combat, and the unironic casting of Oprah Winfrey as a nigh all-powerful Gandalf figure, honestly feels like they found the world's most obnoxious 12-year-old boy, sat him down for a slideshow of their pre-production materials, and every time he cringed, rolled his eyes, or said, "That's so girly," they said, "Make sure that goes in the movie." And the spectacle of a genre blockbuster that feels almost deliberately calculated to passive-aggressively antagonize the presumed standard audience for such things is intermittently amusing enough that I sort of wish the movie overall lived up to it a little bit more. See, A Wrinkle in Time is a seminal 1962 children's science fiction novel by Madeleine L'Engle, widely considered to be both a foundational genre-redefining work of its type and also all but impossible to adapt into a narrative feature, given that it hails from the esoteric philosophical branch of early new wave sci-fi and concerns theoretical quantum physics, self-actualization through introspection, one as metaphor for the other and vice versa, and a lot of it plays out in the realm of psyche rather than purely physical. So it's not exactly Finnegan's Wake, but it's not The Cat in the Hat either. Even as the actual story at first glance presents as a deceptively simple sci-fi narrative in which the highly intelligent but troubled children of a mysteriously vanished scientist are contacted by a trio of cosmic entities who believe their father has been imprisoned by the rapidly expanding galactic-scale evil force which said children may possess the key to defeating by use of mind-triggered interdimensional travel. The fact is, it's more a story about ideas and feelings than action, but said ideas are of the type that require a not insignificant budget to realize, i.e. money of the type that typically precludes a certain amount of action. Or at least spectacle. Director Ava DuVernay's solution in this case is to double up on the mind-expanding flights of fancy while also stripping down the philosophical musings and the scale of the story itself to a more direct internal conflict over the self-esteem of a young female lead played by Storm Reed. And the points where A Wrinkle in Time is allowed to focus on this are generally where the film is at its strongest and works best, playing out elaborate traversals of alien worlds and negotiations of devious mind traps in the context of Reed's character learning to face her fears and embrace her own innate self-worth in order to gain the power to take control of these situations herself. Where it gets bogged down, likewise, is when it deflates the power of these visionary sequences by trying to over-explain them. The production takes flight, often literally, whenever DuVernay is free to let her established skill at montage, visual narrative, and mood piece play out across offbeat, abstract, or even surreal tableaus, but too often gets pulled back down to earth by what feels like a worry that the audience might not be able to follow the quasi-dream logic plotting on their own. Not in terms of laying out the science. In fact, the scenes from the trailer where they do explain the science are bafflingly not present in the actual film, but rather in terms of what's happening on screen and how the audience is meant to feel about it. Which is a shame because whenever the film does get out of its own way and let the very strong visuals, unique use of eclectic music, and the extremely compelling lead performance from Reed speak for itself, the result is extremely engaging. I imagine there's going to be some negative backlash to the decision to so thoroughly background the more era-specific elements of the source material, presenting the it that serves as the nebulous central antagonist less as an allegory for authoritarianism and more as a manifestation of insecurity, hatred, and self-hatred especially, and downplaying L'Engle's more explicitly Christian-tinged moralism with broader, almost New Age perspective grounded in self-esteem and self-actualization. But in the context of the film proper, it makes a lot of sense as the driving philosophy of a story that turns on not only the heroine saving the universe with her ability to love, but also her first needing to love herself and accept it from others to get there. It's an ultimately powerful message carried well by the cast and something that the young audience probably can't hear enough these days. All the better that it's delivered and helped along by a remarkably offbeat cast that also features Chris Pine and Gugu Mbatha-Raw as the super scientist parents, Mindy Kaling and Reese Witherspoon as Oprah's astral accomplices, Zach Galifianakis and the ever-versatile Michael Pena in roles that are best left to be surprised by, and a relative newcomer, Levy Miller, doing very nuanced work as Reed's friend and endearingly earnest love interest. Also impressive is 9-year-old Derek McCabe, who does a really interesting turn as the younger brother. It's a really difficult part that a lot of seasoned adult actors would have probably struggled with in similar context, and it's a credit to the filmmakers for really going for it in terms of a big blockbuster effects film that still has to come down to two age-appropriate child actors playing off only each other in a big thematically complex blowout finale that has to sink or swim entirely on their performances and selling something like a battle that's really all about dialogue and emotion. That's gutsy stuff. So A Wrinkle in Time has quite a few problems and plays out very unevenly, but when it works, it really works, and the overall effect is compelling, refreshing, and ultimately very worthwhile attempt at filming something that's probably still unfilmable, that recalls at its best the surrealistic genre work of John Boorman, and at its least also the surrealistic genre work of John Boorman, come to think of it. In any case, I'm gonna go 3 stars, give this one a shot.